most likely in a first meeting, you're gonna have 30 minutes. You'll spend 10 minutes hearing about the investor and their fund. You'll do intros. That leaves another 10 minutes and change for you really to get through whatever slides and demo you're gonna give. It's imperative that you leave time at the end for questions and discussion around next steps and so on. And so you really, this is basic. You're being forced to take this story that you live every single day and compress it into something compact, but make sure that you do, because if that 30 minutes comes up and you haven't closed on, some sort of next step or understand their process or get their reactions, it's a miss.
Welcome to Austinpreneur, our show about the stories that made Austin, Texas a global hub for startups. The show is produced by Capital Factory and hosted by me, Nick Spiller. As a reminder, by joining Capital Factory, you can plug into the ecosystem where the stories on this show were set. Learn more about us at capitalfactory.com.
Welcome back to the Capital Factory podcast. We have a very special guest today. We are going to hear from an entrepreneur who studied at University of Michigan, got an MBA at the University of California at Berkeley, so almost a Longhorn, comparable schools to UT, as close as you could get. Some great schools. I'm from Michigan. Go blue. But he's a seasoned revenue leader with experience at large companies like SAP, Workday, and WP Engine, which actually started here on this floor. Big success story out of Capital Factory, primarily in sales and marketing roles. We'll dive into that. In 2023, he spun out of WP Engine to start Embrace.ai. We invested at Capital Factory, so proud portfolio company of ours, which is an AI tool to help with product support. And WP Engine was a flagship customer, one of their first customers, which is a pretty good sign. So here to discuss driving LTV with AI, let's welcome Seth Halpern to the show. Welcome, Seth.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you for it. I appreciate it.
Seth, thanks for coming out.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Appreciate the invitation, and thanks for the warm intro.
2 years into driving your own startup, what's it like?
Yeah, it is. I think it's all the things that it's built to be. It's exciting, exhilarating. There is never a dull moment. There are lots of twists and turns daily. And it's amazing to be able to, have a high level of control and autonomy in terms of, where we lead the company. We are, a little over 2 years old. We're, it's myself and a co-founder, and there's a lot that we can move on really quickly as a small company, which, I absolutely enjoy. There's a never-ending set of things to tackle, just as every startup. But it's unbelievably gratifying to, win a new customer. It's, even more gratifying to have that customer be successful and help, tell our story, which is the place we're focused on right now. And it's been a great ride.
Awesome. Well, it's been awesome to watch you just from a distance, and excited to dive in here today and learn a little bit more. And there's a lot of directions we can go, but the topic of the hour is AI. Topic of the decade, or I
Big one right now.
Yeah, it's a big one. But there's a lot of talk about AI writing code, picking up engineering workflows, but also another thing I've been hearing, and I think you've got a good insight on, is using AI on the revenue side of the business. And I've heard people even say that's where most of the rubber is hitting the road in the early days. But yeah, let's dive into that. I mean, from your perspective, as coming from building hundreds of millions of dollars in business, when did you first see AI coming and start kind of taking it seriously as something that you're going to go lean into?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it started around this time 3 years ago. Roughly Thanksgiving 3 years ago was when ChatGPT came on the radar.
Yeah. Possibly one of the most viral product releases ever to happen.
Absolutely.
And just totally.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a rocket ship,
Yeah.
and it's, my mom knows what ChatGPT is. Like, it's just part of the lexicon of, anybody who interfaces with technology. And so for me, that was a moment that felt a lot like other big transformations in enterprise technologies
Yep.
in the past. I've lived through the move to enterprise cloud. A really formative part of my career I spent at Workday, very early days at that company, as companies weren't sure whether they wanted to put their people data in the cloud or not. I felt like I was seeing the movie again, which was like major platform shifts, which represents all kinds of tremendous opportunities. And, at the same time, I was living certain challenges that I could see in my role at WP Engine, who later, went on to become our first customer, that felt addressable with AI. So, there was the combination of like major tectonic shifts in technology, which felt like, real and tangible and transformational, even though that was like GPT-3 maybe at that point in time. But you could feel already that it was powerful. It was going to have a huge level of impact. I had a potential co-founder who would be like basically my number one pick to be a co-founder, Derek Butts, who's in the Bay Area, who I've known for 15 years, back to working very closely together at Workday. He was the right person with some really good complementary skills. And it felt like the timing was right to bring AI into enterprises in different ways. And over the course of, a series of quarters, we went, from landing like some really early customers to decide on honing into where we are right now, which is product support for B2B companies.
Yep. We'll dive into that in a second. I see that there's kind of two sides. One's, driving LTV by acquiring new customers, and then the other is by getting more value out of your old customers and keeping them around longer. But let's start first with acquiring new customers. I mean, if you're a venture-backed tech company or want to be a venture-backed tech company, how should you be thinking about using AI to get customers?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways to potentially leverage AI. The places that we're leaning into, one, are just around content. As a small company, you need to do things that can scale and increase your visibility and exposure in the marketplace. And part of that is content, whether it's on our website, via blog posts, on LinkedIn, through case studies, etc. Like all of that is scalable and can help, provide beneficial impacts in terms of SEO and other things. And so there are really powerful use cases around content for early stage companies. And that's like whether you're using ChatGPT or we use our products, really heavily for content creation, editing, etc. But my co-founder often will just record himself talking. Like there'll be a particular topic we want to build a blog post around. He'll record himself talking for a period of time, take that recording, load it into Embrace, and that can become a baseline of basically unstructured content that can be turned into something that's much more scalable. I use it to write content in different ways as well. And it just helps you go a whole lot faster.
Yeah.
And, I think, for companies, it's deciding what's sort of the human component, what's the AI component, and, what's the right balance in terms of new content generation. That's certainly one.
Well, and before we move on to two, I mean, content is king, as they say. And what's interesting is it helps create content at all these different levels, whether you're just writing an email, a blog post, a social post. It's, we're doing similar. We think your co-founder does his audio recordings. That's how we think of this podcast. And it's, we kind of always had this high level view of our ecosystem. And through this, we're recording these deeper stories of what the entrepreneurs are doing. And then we get all that, into our database. And we think there's things we can do, one, from a marketing standpoint, but also for us, from a portfolio standpoint, and really understanding who's doing interesting things, who we can, who we should introduce to who for various reasons. And, so yeah, content is king. And the other thing that's coming, I don't know if I haven't seen it generally production level yet or used, but is video content, AI video. Have you guys started messing with any of that?
We haven't gone down that path yet.
Yeah.
We'll potentially use our product capabilities to write the scripts for that content.
Yeah.
But the production, we're still doing ourselves. But absolutely see, hear, read about you've got just emerging and seemingly really powerful in your content creation.
If you watch the podcast, you'll see some less than stellar AI impressions of me at certain points, reading ads, things like that. But seeing myself as an AI was such a just light bulb moment, and seeing, I immediately thought of the phrase from Steve Jobs, like your iPhone's an extension of yourself. Like your AI will be an extension of yourself. And this is something that not just for companies, for people, will play in. And I don't know exactly the implications, but I knew it was like, wow, I was actually on sabbatical when Aaron played the video of me to the whole company. And I started getting messages. I didn't even know what was going on. But I was out there, or something that kind of had my likeness was out there doing
No, I mean, it's like simultaneously like amusing and a look into the future. And there's a lot of ways to make it feel like a reflection of you, or the brand of the company, or the style of the individual that's represented. Because there are mechanisms to leverage, like your brand tone and voice, like provide really custom instructions about how it should behave, so it doesn't just feel like a generic AI output.
Okay, so content. What was second or third piece around acquiring new customers?
Yeah, so we have been leaning into a popular technology called Clay.
That's new to me.
So. Clay, in sort of the outbound marketing world, has become, a fairly popular mechanism to do what I describe as personalization at scale, right? And so there is, enrichment capabilities that Clay has access to. It can, understand who your target audiences are, and help craft fairly personalized messages for them. And, it's a company that's, grown really significantly over, they've been around for, 5+ years. But, we're using that as a mechanism to do broad-based outbound. Our market is big. We're not yet a household name. And so for us, connecting at scale to like a really identifiable set of buyers, which are often like support leaders, chief customer officers at companies of a certain profile, like we can identify them, find them, and then target them with messages that feel personalized, but across large prospect sets. So Clay is that's another technology that's worth looking at, to help on the new customer acquisition front.
So it deepens the effectiveness of digital marketing, where you kind of had, the advent of digital marketing 10, 20 years ago that allowed us to target these specific groups in unique ways. Now you can, go 10 times better by finding those same groups, but having messages that are personalized to each person within it.
Absolutely.
Got it.
So that's been helpful for us. And, I think there's an opportunity for companies to engage more deeply, on the sales as, or AI as sales front. I think we're at a place where we want to engage one-to-one with our prospects. And so we're hands-on. There's AI that we provide them capability to access during our engagement with them to be able to get answers. But I think for us, just being able to engage in a human way with our prospects helps us build deeper relationships and so on.
Yep, absolutely. At scale, key point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was that the third piece, or was there a third one?
That's the third piece. Is just like, how do you engage like day to day with prospects? We have customers, so our central use case is around support. We have customers who have fairly technical products and fairly technical buyers, and like the sales teams themselves are not deeply technical. Like that's not an uncommon sort of combination. And so for those customers of ours, we're providing them access to Embrace so that they can get answers to questions that are, they're getting from prospects on a call or via email, to be able to provide, deep accurate technical answers to all the questions that they face. That especially for less tenured sellers, they may not sort of have built into their talk tracks yet.
Right. So
just enablement.
Right. Enabling your sales team to get up to speed faster, acquire that company knowledge faster.
Yes.
Get there and perform high.
Yeah, those customers will take like sales enablement content, their website content, objection handling docs, persona docs, put them into a collection, and then which is like basically an aggregation of digital content that our customers assemble, and then tap into that content with Slack, which is where a lot of sales teams are naturally engaging and getting information. They can ask questions of Embrace and get answers in real time via Slack versus waiting on somebody else to respond.
Awesome. All right. So on the acquire new customer, we had content is key, and Clay, outbound marketing using Clay was a tool. And then this idea of engaging on a daily basis in a personal way with your customers on an ongoing cadence. All right. And then let's shift gears to how AI can help support existing customers and how it can help the support piece. And it's a very layman's observation, but a seasoned sales leader and, probably your whole life, is there ever a time where you don't want more support for your product? And I could just kind of, I don't want to assume what went through your mind, but it's like, oh, wow, this tool, I'm going to go create something that solves this big problem I've always wanted is, more support.
Yeah, we built our business around exactly this, which is a really clear, tangible, realizable use case for generative AI. And, every company we talk to, regardless of size, has information about their products. Like it may be as simple as an FAQ doc. Oftentimes it's a knowledge base that sits in, Zendesk or Notion or Confluence or Silverview. Oftentimes it's a combination of like many different places. So the content exists for an end customer to get answers or for a support tech to get answers, but it's been difficult historically to tap into that. And so whether a company is like 50,000 people or 50 people, they're all wrestling with a version of this. So this is like the thesis behind Embrace is there's an opportunity to really up-level support. We're focused on B2B companies, and whether it is for a support tech and a support team to gain scale, or the customers of our customers to provide a self-service experience, which is useful, valuable, and is a real alternative to like the traditional library of articles that is difficult to navigate and digest. These are places where we're seeing a lot of uptake. And I think it's been really interesting to observe companies are at different stages in terms of their life cycle with adopting AI. And a relatively early frontier for companies is this: how do we support and provide a better post-sales experience to our customers who don't, sometimes they want to talk to a person, and they should be able to talk to a person if they have a particularly complex issue, if it's something where, they really need to tap into a certain level of expertise. But that isn't necessarily their desire. They want an answer. They want to be able to resolve their issue. And they want to be able to do it, quickly on whatever hour. If it's, Sunday at 2 a.m, they want to be able to get answers to questions about the product that they've signed up to use. And so there's this really interesting combination of a business case, this a support meets AI use case is highly quantifiable. Our customers have quantified it in terms of, avoided tickets or scale for their support team members. And all those things, matter in an environment where companies are making very thoughtful, buying decisions. But it's not just about that. It's about the customer experience, which all of a sudden, we're seeing companies not only realize a business case, but also see an improvement in CSAT, an improvement in the metrics that they use to measure how their, the quality of their customers' interactions. Our perspective, and this ties to this topic as a whole, is it's all about customer lifetime value. And our reason for being is to help companies drive up customer lifetime value, which ties directly to, company value and so on. And so if you can provide a great experience to your users and customers, they're much more likely to like renew, expand, introduce you to people that they know, like be a referral point, all of the things that, that you want as a company. It takes a lot of work and a lot of cost to land that next new customer. It's much more efficient to grow the ones that you have and keep them on board, drive, NRR, GR, et cetera. And so there's a huge opportunity now to achieve some of the scalability benefits of this use case, but also just drive a really powerful customer experience. And that could be for our customers in their product or on a help site. Like you mentioned, WP Engine, that was customer number one for us. If you go to wpengine.com/support, that's their public support center, and Embrace is on that center and it's helping provide answers, at scale to their customer base and even their non-customer base because it's ungated. We're in their portal experience, but also their entire support team is leveraging Embrace to be able to get answers faster, answer tickets faster. We have apps for Slack, for Zendesk, for Jira Service Management, for Salesforce, for the places where support teams are working. We're working hard to bring Embrace to them so that they could answer the next ticket with quality and efficiency both.
Yeah. So it's, on one hand, this is probably the obvious piece, that just allows your existing support team to handle more tickets.
Yes.
And if you're a fast growing company, you got to hire a lot of people. That takes a little bit of the load off of scaling that team because each person you hire can do. But there's also this opportunity to provide a better experience, more value to the customer by implementing these tools as well. So it's more efficient and you create more value for your customers.
And on the first point, for sure there's the opportunity to handle more tickets and scale, but also for those level one support techs that are handling many of the same questions over and over again.
Right.
It gets them out of the business of having to repeatedly answer them how do I add a user? How do I log in, et cetera? Yeah. We have a customer, a company called Simplicity that just published a case study with us that talked about their support techs now having more of a revenue mindset and thinking about how to allocate some time towards revenue generating opportunities with their customer base in conjunction with the sales team. And so some of it is about how do you just continually up level and have even more impact from the support teams that are in place.
Yeah, incredible. And then the self-service piece, that's kind of what you see at wpengine.com/support, or kind of walk me through where are you able to turn something that used to require light touch into the self-service situation?
I mean, they're a great example where, historically they had what most companies have, which is a really in-depth library of articles. And think about any sort of help center you've ever gone to with a technology, product that has a search bar, and you type in a question and you get returned a list of articles.
Yep.
And hopefully one of those articles is on point, but one way or the other, you have to read, digest multiple articles. And a lot of times companies or users will just say, I don't have the time.
Yep.
I'm going to open up a ticket or
Yep.
take whatever action to escalate to a human.
Yep.
That's been the approach historically, not just for WP Engine, but many other companies. And it's still the MO for many companies. If you go think about any enterprise products you're using, go to their help center, type in response. My guess is 4 times out of 5, you're going to get a list of articles,
right?
Which is exciting for us because it represents significant opportunity. So, WP Engine has on that site, and then also with their within their portal, for their existing customers, have placed Embrace so that their users can get answers. And what that's translated to for them is a 45% improvement in self-service success. Mm-hmm. So that users in there are 45% more likely to get an answer instead of opening a chat or creating a ticket, etc.
Yeah.
And so for them, it's been this great combo of business case plus addressing a need from their customer base. Keller Williams is another good example of one of our customers where they have 150,000 plus agents that are part of their franchise network. And they've provided self-service to those agents within their own technology properties. And, for them, it's helped up-level the experience, unlock tremendous content about all kinds of offerings that Keller has, and be able to do it in a meaningful way that, they've won awards for around just being AI forward. They published a case study with us, and that's another example.
Very good. Very good. I always like to end around fundraising, and you've had some success here raising some money. Any pro tips for entrepreneurs out there that they should keep in mind while raising money?
Yeah, totally. So I would, I would say whatever sort of pitch deck and approach you start with, think about it as you haven't poured concrete. It's a starting point that you want to spend a lot of time building the plan around. And what's the story that we want to tell? How do we want to tell it in a polished, professional, concise way? But very likely you will start to realize there are questions you didn't anticipate that will start to come up from people you're presenting it to. And having a mindset around iteration and continuous improvement, I think is really important. So, the first version of the deck that we use versus where we finished were quite different, because we realized there were certain questions that we needed to address, and it's better, I think, in a lot of cases, to proactively address a point, because you're most likely in a first meeting you're gonna have 30 minutes. Every once in a while it might be longer, but it's you're gonna have 30 minutes, and you need to bank on no more than that. So the more questions you can address versus having them ask the question and having that consume time, it's really helpful. I would also say, in general, plan to use the time really efficiently. You'll get a sense of the rhythm of these discussions. The first discussions in particular, you'll spend 10 minutes hearing about the investor and their fund. You'll do intros. That leaves another 10 minutes and change for you really to get through whatever slides and demo you're going to give. And it's imperative that you leave time at the end for questions and discussion around next steps and so on. And so you really, this is basic, but can be easily overlooked because we're all really excited about our product, our company, and you're being forced to take this story that you live every single day and compress it into something compact. But make sure that you do, because if that 30 minutes comes up and the investor needs to go to their next call, which is often the case, and you haven't closed on some sort of next step or understand their process or get their reactions, it's a miss.
Yeah.
So those are a couple things. An entrepreneur told me some advice early on, which was, it's about introductions to investors. And so Capital Factory is the best game in town for helping answer this question that you've asked of me. And it has a network of, tremendous investing capacity here in town through not just Capital Factory, but, local funds, angel investors, et cetera. So, you guys do this every day. But the intro to the investor really matters, right? And who it comes from, can have a huge level of impact. So the best case was, get an intro from a founder at a company that successfully exited via the particular firm. And then from there it's a founder in their portfolio. And then it's a founder who, may have a connection to them, et cetera, et cetera. Going in cold, can work, but it's really tough. I mean, VCs are barraged, their time they're just always time constrained. And so they're going to look for a warm intro and prioritize it above everything else. And so find ways to get warm introductions through folks, in your network, whether they're other investors or entrepreneurs or customers. It's pretty essential.
Yeah, absolutely. So three things I'd unpack there. One is iterate on your materials, on your narrative. always been the case in a fast-moving world like AI, probably even more so. And when you go out to market, the first 5, 10, 20 meetings you take, you're going to discover some new questions that maybe you weren't prepared, and build those into your deck moving forward, so you don't have to waste time answering questions or spend time answering questions on that topic. 2, I thought it was a good one that I see entrepreneurs is leave time for discussion at the end. And if you're pitching right up to the end of the call, no bueno, and you're not gonna get what you need out of the meeting, which is some inkling of feedback from this investor and hopefully a next step. 3rd is give solid intro, which we talk a lot about around here. And a lot of ways VCs are like they're looking for reasons to say no. Seth introduced me to a company. I can't say no to that meeting. He's very important. I'm going to take it every single time, even if I'm not going to take a meeting. I might take the meeting if it's not a fit for Capital Factory, but I would probably preface that a little bit, but I'd still take the meeting and meet the entrepreneur. Excellent. Well, thank you for entertaining my questions.
Yeah, no, of course.
We appreciate it. Let's open it up to our audience here. Who's got a question for Seth?
Yeah.
Let's go, Val.
Yeah, I have two questions. First, about the product. I think that the knowledge base to the company is the biggest problem which we can fix today with AI. And I spent, I don't know how many months to find solution. So I know everything about like all the companies which try to fix this. And some companies who have this data, like Google Drive, like Microsoft, or ClickUp, Notion, they try to do this internally in the product. They have some connection with external solution and data as well. And other guys like Zendesk, Zoho Desk, and all these like support stuff, they try to do the same, and I guess maybe years before. So my question, how do you see, because it's crowd and I could not find any excellent solution today. So what do you see like a excellent future vision for knowledge base with AI for most companies?
Yeah, so I think, we see similar dynamics to you in terms of like lots of different solutions that are out there that house knowledge, whether they're intended as a knowledge base or otherwise. I think the future one is, there's still a company mindset which is around the knowledge base, because that's how companies have operated to date. It's, I need a complete and thorough knowledge base with structured, formatted articles. The reality is, I think over a handful of years, that historic knowledge base, like artifact, is going to become less important because AI is so adept at handling unstructured data, right? You don't really need like a beautifully formatted, perfect, article to present to an end customer. You need that knowledge to be able to answer questions. So, I think there'll be an evolution, which is being able to take in, unstructured data. Like we tap into, if our customers would like, we tap into select Slack channels they have, because a lot of answers surface in Slack. So a customer can bring their Slack channel or Slack channels into Embrace alongside with Confluence, Notion, etc. content. So one is like structured versus unstructured data. I think 2, a place we've really focused on is being agnostic to any of those sources. And I think some of the companies that you've mentioned are not, their knowledge base is the center of the universe. Yeah. And for us, it doesn't matter, which is why, we have a pre-built integration to the Zendesk knowledge base. We have one to Notion, to Confluence. We have the ability to bring in Jira tickets and Zendesk tickets and lots of other sources, because it all matters. And so we want to be able to aggregate and tap into it. And I think the third piece is, you maybe touched on a little bit, was like the ability to identify gaps, which every company has. Doesn't matter how robust their knowledge team is, products evolve, they change, there's releases that are coming out constantly. And so companies are wrestling with knowledge gaps. We identify knowledge gaps. We help companies understand, where they are. And then we're also tapping into other sources of content that can provide new knowledge content. So imagine if you can spot a knowledge gap, you know that somebody has answered a Zendesk ticket or engineering has handled a Jira ticket that's actually answered the question, but right now it's a gap. So we can, we have tools that we give our AI agents that can tap into Zendesk and Jira closed tickets and be able to use that as a source to construct a new article and close that gap. So those are a few pieces.
Yeah. And yeah, it's very maybe important because too hard to build all this like excellent cleanup knowledge base, and I know zero company who build this. That's why maybe nobody don't want to do this like routine boring stuff, but it's cool. Another question, it's like too complementary for Nick's question about fundraising. So if we're talking about pre-seed and seed round, and talking about like capital factor in Austin and Silicon Valley, because I saw the over 50% of pre-seed investments Silicon Valley gave, and another 50%, less only 50% all the like US. So what do you recommend to do for pre-seed companies? Need they build some connection with Silicon Valley, with New York and in other markets, and try to be here as well, like for Austin-based companies, or you can raise money just only in Austin or in Texas, and it's fine, and you can do this from angel round or seed, and so on. Because seed looks like much easier than pre-seed because too hard to find someone here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, listen, I think it's always good to have options and to be able to, tap into different pools of capital. And what I would say, I've been in Austin for a little over, 20 years, which is, not to say I grew up here, but I've been here long enough to see certain arcs. And where the local community is compared to where it started when I first got here is worlds apart. Meaning, you obviously have like you have Capital Factory as like an example. We're sitting in their offices. The organization is is thriving and having an impact in a lot of different ways. And you have many early stage venture funds that have generally like a headquarters here or a presence here. And that's very, very different than existed certainly when I got here, which there's a lot of centralization around like a very short list of funds that were operating at that time. So you have a growing ecosystem. You have Bay Area companies that are more apt to do investment here in Austin, which has not always been the case. I think what you have in the Bay Area are there just are more funds and there are more dollars to deploy. That like there's all the data will show you that. There are also more local companies that are vying for those dollars. I do think this is I believe a good community to raise like a pre-seed round in. And some of it depends on the size of the pre-seed, but like you have the combination of firms that really like are interested in doing pre-seed. If like Capital Factory can help navigate to some of those, you also have like this cohort of just like early stage angel investors that can help fill out a pre-seed round. So I don't, if you're here raising in town, there's going to be some benefits to it, and you're going to have investors that are going to want to invest in local founders. And I know there are funds here that, I like traded emails recently with, one of the most prominent firms in town that I made an intro to, a person who wasn't totally sure where they were going to settle, whether it was going to be Austin or somewhere else. And the investor was really dead set on having, Texas-based founders. And so you have the benefit of being in town, which, can give you some advantages. But, in our case, I'm here, my co-founder's in the Bay Area. We can tap into like both networks and communities and, get the best of both worlds. So I would just say like, keep your options open. I'm a pragmatist. Just, be pragmatic about the approach.
And I would add in Austin's unique in that it's one of these cities where the San Francisco, New York, these coastal investors, they're interested in Austin and they will invest here, and they are, even if they're not. And so definitely great local ecosystem, but I would be targeting any investor and really trying to find investors that, like, more thematically, if you're selling into enterprise software, like, who are those investors if there's a specific industry, and be more agnostic to location. But given the choice, I'd pick a local investor because they're here, but I wouldn't not. I would 100% be building network in New York and San Francisco, and there's people all over the world really that are looking at Austin for investment. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Talking about bigger, more established companies that are, right now as AI is getting to a point where it's like actually more than good enough to handle a lot of workflows, like what departments or specific workflows do you think, and obviously can vary by industry, but do you think can have like the more quicker ROI from actually implementing AI? I mean, apart from support.
Yeah, totally. I think places where companies have seen a lot of uptake, certainly on the coding side. I think our engineering organization, most engineering organizations are leaning into various tools to help on the coding front. That is an easy to deploy, like, proven use case. That can take advantage of, there's a whole slew of, tools out there. Some are very high profile, but there's a range that are out there. There are, like, very, like, marketing specific tools that are out there. I know that, like, there's Jasper here in town, historically, but there are others that are really honed in on a particular use case tied to, like, marketing for extensive marketing organizations that need very specialized capabilities. You've got marketing. There are I think there's this evolution that's going to happen where AI capabilities are now and where they'll be will begin to unlock additional use cases that are out there. The models are going to continue to improve. The models will become, I think in general, the LLMs as large language models are really good at human language. But I think, we'll reach a place where AI can have a deeper impact as it relates to, like, quantitative analysis and questions, engagement that people have that's much more data driven, which, I think is not at the same place as it's, AI's capabilities with language, generally speaking, for the public LLM providers. There are a lot of places where AI will go, but right in the here and now, I think as companies are looking to, like, for tangible use cases, it's like, it is support. Like, I'm biased, but I think genuinely, like, it's a really tangible use case that companies are having success around. It's like content generation and creation, and it's, coding are a few, like, really prominent examples.
I would call out, like, kind of, you touched on it, but just another frame is, like, everything, like, 0 to 1 you can use AI for. And, like, if you're just starting out and you're semi-technical, you don't even know how to code, but you got to be able to use software tools. You can use Cursor for writing code, or other tools to get your first MVP out, marketing, all these things, versus before you had to go get a graphic designer, you had to get a developer, and, like, those were just unavoidable costs that now, thinking back when I was a student, it's like, man, I would have been able to really go so much further with these.
It's a great
tools.
point.
Yeah.
It's a mindset shift that I think a user has to go through in terms of what's capable. Like, a very simple example that I would give is, I might go, ask an AI tool, like, if I'm creating an outbound email campaign, give me best practices in terms of how should my subject line read? And then I'll think about it and say, well, why do I need to ask that question? Why don't I just, put in a more elaborate prompt, describe who I am, my company, what we're trying to achieve, and say, give me 10 subject lines. And so I like a super simple example, but I think just continuing to think through like the next order of what's possible with AI is hugely valuable. I mean, I'll use it for us, what systems our prospects use really matter. In particular, their ticketing system. Like, many of our customers and prospects use Zendesk as an example. They use other ticketing systems as well, but, Zendesk has been a particularly popular like profile. I want to know when I'm getting on a call with a prospect, are they using Zendesk or not? And if you do like in-depth analysis, like you can see code on their site. You can look at like people's LinkedIn profiles, how they describe themselves. Maybe they talk about, the ticketing system. You can see job postings that are out there. Like you can generally figure it out. And AI for us can help us like accelerate for a given prospect. Like, tell me what ticketing system they use. And by the way, like I also want to know does engineering use Jira? Because we have a really good story for that. Are they a Slack shop or a team shop? Like we can help with either one, but what are they using? Are they using like Confluence or Notion? Like I want to know their landscape, and AI can help there. So I think like, whether it's, using Embrace or like literally like a $20 ChatGPT subscription, there's a huge amount of lift. Your point is a great one, Nick. Like as an early stage company, like you have to be a generalist. I'm responsible at my company for like sales, marketing, customer success. Yeah. And, all those things are a team sport for us as a company, but we don't have a lot of specialization. And so just being able to tackle more fast and, really like capital efficient way, AI like can provide a lot of mileage.
Absolutely. Maybe one more question for anybody. Lucy?
My question is similar like Wells. So, first question about your tool, really. So you can connect to their CRM system, for example, where people decide the questions with their customers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how can you control, for example, if we are talking about this knowledge phase, if we have articles, it's great. It's like your standards, what you need to do. But if we connect to all conversations and we see how people, especially we say about big company, somebody can decide question maybe not right way, but it will come to their knowledge base. How can you understand that this is correct way, this is incorrect way? Because if it will add to the knowledge system and will change our articles, what we wrote before, it could be wrong way.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, the way we control for it is by having a human in the loop, right? So we are not, while we help with the automated generation of those articles, we're not like pushing those articles without any sort of vetting into the knowledge base. So our customer plays a role in terms of validating the content. Because, sometimes you have situations with like conflicting source data, and you want to have like an expert who's actually, vetting the article. So one is, we have that as a measure to make sure that there's not just this blind sort of push into the knowledge base. The second approach that we take is our users, like, in terms of like support text, can provide feedback to the answers that they're receiving, right? So if you're a support tech and you're answering like tickets and you're drawing from all the sources that I mentioned before, and Embrace gives a response that feels like mostly right, but actually like is not completely right because of this release that just came out recently, then the user can, hit a feedback button. They can input feedback, within their ticketing environment, and that flows to a centralized triage point where, the right person is monitoring all those feedback points, and they're either dispositioning them themselves, or they're assigning to somebody else who's an expert to like assess, close the gap, if needed, et cetera. So it's human in the loop at the right points along the way.
So mostly it's a specialist what you provide who will check this, right?
It's like some term, customer expert.
Yeah. Or product expert. Okay. So, where we're providing lift is streamlining the creation of the knowledge content, right? Which is, writing for most people is just hard. And, I know I need to create these X number of articles, but I've got a blank sheet of paper and there's like 50 other things I want to do. or I need to do. And so it's hard to get started. And so for us, it's like we'll draft the article using, internal company proprietary sources, but there is an expert, a product expert, a support expert, maybe somebody from product management, like somebody, an SC, somebody who has expertise that can decide, whether to take the article as is or make adjustments to it.
Thank you. And the second question about the raising money. So you say that you have your partner in San Francisco and most of your investigation from Austin and San Francisco, yeah?
We're headquartered in Austin. We have critical mass of people in Austin. My co-founder, our AI lead are in the Bay Area. And then we have a distributed team that's in other cities around the country. We have some developers in Krakow, Poland. And so we're working in a distributed way.
Why I ask? When we raised money and spoke with different investors here, we spoke with, for example, Dallas investors, Austin's, and less with the from Silicon Valley. And what we know, for example, investors from Dallas and from Austin, they're different. Right. And if we say about investors from Silicon Valley, they're different too. So what is your maybe advice? When I say about their difference, they want to hear different things about your product, how it will grow, how it will for the future, what they want to see in your deck and your product and so on. So what is your advice? How is better? What better to say? What about better to say with this master from, for example, Austin, Silicon Valley, and maybe another one area what you used the most?
Something to be mindful of is who's seeing what deals at a given point in time. You have more software companies in the Bay Area than anywhere else in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so Bay Area investors are going to see, all the hot software companies, and whoever's in market or recently, raised is going to be a data point that they have, because they probably talked to that company, maybe they invested in them, but they saw their pitch. In Austin, I don't know that the deal flow is quite as high. They're going to see different deals. They're less apt to see, or less likely to see Bay Area companies, like full Bay Area companies here in Austin, because those companies are probably just going to raise in the Bay Area. And so, I made this point before, but I think the markets just have trade-offs. What they're looking for, it may vary depending on the themes of the investors. But, it's, there's a growing and meaningful, software ecosystem that's here in town, for sure. It's, again, just like the investing community has evolved, the entrepreneurial community has evolved, and we're in a totally different place than 20 odd years ago, which is fantastic. But there just are fewer software companies here in town. And so, there's maybe less efficiency in this market, because you have, fewer investors than you have in the Bay Area. I don't know, there's no silver bullet in terms of how to answer your question. From my own experience talking about Bay Area and Austin investors, it depends on the person. Okay. Depends on the firm. You'll get a pretty good sense of their focus. I mean, this was another learning, for me, was really there are differences from the firm, and one VC and another VC can be totally different. And so, for me, I tried to really dial in, what stage do they invest in? This is a basic one, but they're, whether it's on their website or in the first call you have with them, you're going to get a read. Do they do pre-seed, seed, and A with a bias towards pre-seed and seed? Are they, do they do seed, A, and beyond, but they actually want to write bigger checks at later stage deals? Do they want to lead? Most firms will want to lead. But sometimes you have ones that are, their MO is to be a more of a passive investor, and they'll participate, but they don't want to lead. what are the check sizes that they're looking to write, which for you like ties to, the equity that you're going to sell in your company through a raise. And, are you looking to raise enough money where they're a good fit? Or do they write smaller checks than you're interested in? Do they write bigger checks than you're interested in? And so I'm happy to like be a resource like after this conversation, but I think really like knowing who the investor is can help you get a read and seeing like what's in their portfolio, what's their background, personally can get a read on what might matter most to them.
A couple things I'd add. First thing is stay true to your vision as an entrepreneur, and if you change your pitch to match what an investor wants, they might invest in you, and then you're stuck building someone else's vision that's not your vision because you changed it. And you kind of need to find who's there. The other part that I found is the easiest like objective thing to dig into is the size of the fund that the investor is investing out of. I think at a high level there are philosophical differences, but I won't get into those. But just in general, look, the Austin VCs are like $250 million and smaller funds, maybe a little bigger. Broad strokes, there's exceptions, but that's what I see. And then in Silicon Valley, they're investing out of these billion-dollar funds, multi-billion-dollar funds, right? And so VCs making investments, looking at companies that have the potential to return the fund and drive the returns that they owe their investors or trying to drive for their investors, is generally 3x their fund size, right? And so if I have a $1 billion fund, I'm looking for an investment that I can get $3 billion at the end of the day out of, right? And they're probably going to own 30% of your company, so you got to have like a $10 billion exit, right? And that's what you need to be honed in on and have a story for. If it's a $100 million fund, they're looking for investments that can return $300 million, or potentially even less if it's smaller, and so that tends to lean towards less of like a big moonshot pitch and more of like, what's the market play? How do we grow revenue? What's your traction? And, getting more to this, $500 million, $1 billion outcome, also super, super big and hard to do. But much different stories and much different trajectories. So I think like that's my starting point is like, okay, what's the size of this fund? And then everything Seth said, and just really knowing who these investors are and trying to find the ones that believe the same thing about, one, the future that you do, and then also how you're going to build this business into that future, right? Like what's the path to get to that future? And it's not easy, especially your first time. Like after you kind of build some investors and you know the market, it's you kind of know who to go pitch and how people think. But the first time, it's a little bit like walking through the forest.
I would just say like complete +1 to the point that you made around fund size, which I should have mentioned. I didn't. There's this like tranche of funds that everybody knows. A16Z and Benchmark and Sequoia and like very prominent Bay Area firms that have like a lot of cachet and history and bring out for lots of like good reasons. But I think like your point is dead on, which is like there are a ton of smaller funds out there that actually can be a better fit for earlier stage companies because those big players have to write big checks. Like they really, they have to deploy much bigger pools of capital. And, if you find like a, $100 to $250 million fund, and there are a lot of them out there, some of whom you've never heard of, but have like amazing general partners, and a really good track record, it means that they can write a smaller check that may be just right for you for your stage and be very happy with it because they're going to have most firms are going to have they're going to have a number of investments that they're going to look to make over the course of like the life of a fund, and they're going to have a typical check size, and so it's like it just becomes this like math problem basically. And I would advocate for considering like, smaller funds as a really interesting place to potentially raise.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Seth, on that note, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the invite, and I loved chatting with all of you. And I'm happy to be a resource coming out of today. And I will say, I've spent a lot of time like just vetting different solutions that are in the market. And if people want to reach out, like I may have ideas around like agencies or technologies or things that may be valuable to you all. If you're looking to make a decision around something to like up-level your capabilities internally.
What's the best way to reach out?
Just Seth at embrace.ai.
Awesome.
Or ping me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Seth.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Austinpreneur. Don't forget to check out capitalfactory.com to learn more about us and join our community. If you have thoughts about the show or ideas on how we can work together, reach out to me directly via email, nickspiller@capitalfactory.com. Shout out to the Capital Factory Dream Team for making this podcast possible, and special thanks to Aaron Handworker, who masterfully recorded and edited the show. Come back next week for a whole new episode.